Shavua Tov, everyone. So glad to see you all. We're continuing in Sefer Nechemia, and we're going to begin Perek Gimel, which is a tough Perek to learn only because it's very repetitive in a way. It really discusses building the actual wall. You know, we discussed the idea of building a wall, and a wall is a very important thing to have. It really gives a sense of security. Last night, I took someone home who lives currently in the old city, Iratika, inside the walls. And even today, when you go through Shar Yafo, when you go through these gigantic walls, and then you're inside the old city, inside the Iratika, there is a sense of you're inside. You know, you're secure by these big, gigantic walls, and when you pass through them to go back out to Yerushalayim, to outside of Iratika, there's a feeling that you just left Iratika, right? So these walls are important, even today, when everything is open and we can go in and out. But the truth is, a guy like me who doesn't live in the old city, I can't just bring my car into the old city. It's not that easy to go through Shar Yafo, for instance, with the car. You have to have a special license plate to be able to get in. So we can only imagine how important it was for security reasons to have a wall then. I want to backtrack for a second where we are in Perek Gimel. So when Nechemia arrives to Israel, Yerushalayim, that was his whole plan. He goes out at nighttime, 3 days after he comes to Yerushalayim, and he encircles the walls of Yerushalayim at night. Right? We discussed that last week. And the reason why he did it at night was to examine the situation of the wall, so you can see the ruins, but he didn't tell anyone. And it should be noted that Nechemia, first of all, didn't encompass all of Yerushalayim, didn't go around all of Yerushalayim. Last week, I showed you a couple of maps that I made to show you which part of Yerushalayim he really went through. Mainly the eastern and the northern parts, because apparently those areas were particularly damaged during the time ever since Nebuchadnezzar, through the Shomronim, through the Shavei Tzion Aliyah. And it seems that Nechemia's behavior, at least in the beginning, from the pshat of the psukim, is very puzzling. And we asked, why does he decide to review and examine the wall at night? Because after all, it's much more convenient to see with your eyes what's going on, to see the breaches in the wall, to see the ruins during the day when you can see everything. At nighttime, don't forget, we're talking about nighttime when there's no lampposts, there's no LEDs, there's no flashlights that can really show you what's going on. You had to go around with, I guess, some fire or some wick, something to allow him to really see, because it was pitch dark, unless there's the moon, right? But even then, it's hard to see. So why does he do it dafka at night? Doesn't make sense. And even more so, we asked why Nechemia hides this action of his from everyone. He doesn't tell anyone what's going on, not even the people with him. And this secrecy is what we say in Hebrew, darsheni. It begs an answer. So as we will see from the rest of the book of Nechemia, Nechemia knew that he was acting on borrowed time, and therefore he had to act quickly. And that's one of the reasons why, unlike Ezra, when Nechemia comes to Yerushalayim, almost immediately 3 days pass and he's already, in active mode. Whereas Ezra Sofer waited a couple of months. So upon Nechemia's arrival in Yerushalayim, he basically tells us about his future enemies. And we saw that last week, right? In Perek Bet, Pasuk Yud, Nechemia is relaying to us that there's these guys, these leaders, these governors who govern around Yerushalayim, Sanballat, and Achoroni, and Tovia. And the psukim go as follows in Perek Bet, Pasuk Yud. It says, Vayishma Sanbalat HaChoroni v'Tovia ha'eved ha'amoni vayera lahem ra'a gedola asher ba Adam levakesh tova livnei Yisrael. And we really learned a lot from that pasuk. It's a very sad pasuk. And we learned that there are people out there that are evil and that just want to harm Jewish people for no reason, really. They can't stand to see something good happening to Am Yisrael. And later we met another leader that was mentioned. His name was Geshem Ha'aravi, who was, as we'll see later, he harasses the Jews, mamash. So these three leaders, Geshem, Sanbalat, and Tovia Ha'eved Ha'amoni, they sought to thwart Nechemia's plans and harm Yerushalayim. That's what they wanted to do, and that's what they tried to do, as we'll see as we go through Perek Gimel and Daled. So at first, these three figures, these leaders, they didn't know what Nechemia's plans were, right? Because he comes and the first thing he does, he goes at nighttime when no one's around. Usually people go to sleep at nighttime. Nowadays we have lighting and so we stay up at night. But it used to be that people used to go to sleep relatively early. Tzet Kochavim was Tfilat Arvit, and then immediately afterwards, people would stay up a little bit. If you were going to more learned, you would stay up a little bit, but you would basically go to sleep and wake up at dawn the next morning, right? So there was a reason why he did it late at night, so he's not seen by anyone. So Nechemia really sought to maintain the advantage of the surprise. He was afraid that if all the residents of Yerushalayim, Jewish people, would be informed that he was checking the condition of the wall, he was trying to figure out how to fix it, what the best way to fix it, what materials are missing. News would somehow find its way to his enemies. And what is his enemies going to do with this information? They'll succeed in thwarting his plan. I do want to emphasize, I don't know if I emphasized this last week, that in this chess game, because it really is a chess game, in my family, we used to play chess a lot growing up. I still love chess, and chess is a game of minds. It's trying to sneak up on your enemy, on your opponent, without him knowing, and do it in a very strategic way, and that's really what. And plan ahead, right? The more you can plan ahead, the more moves you can plan ahead, the better. You can see the end game, more than your opponent. So there's this chess game going on between Nechemia and these three governors who are basically his enemy, Am Yisrael's enemy, between Nechemia and these three. And time plays a critical role. We also know, by the way, in chess, there are many ways of playing chess. Professional chess is when you have a timer, and depends if it's a 5-minute game, a 3-minute game, a 20-minute game, 40-minute game. It depends on the championship. But if your time runs out, you lose, even if you were in a better position than the other side. So time really plays a critical role, and Nechemia knows that the second he plays his hand, his move, right? The second they find out what he's doing, it's going to upset his enemies immensely. And what are they going to do with this information? Well, we know what the Shomronim do. When we were learning Sefer Ezra in the beginning, before Ezra came to Eretz Yisrael, the Shavei Tzion, when they came down to build Beit HaMikdash with the full authority and the license, the Igeret, as we saw, from Koresh himself, from Cyrus, the Shomronim complained, and they sent letters to stop and halt the construction of the Beit HaMikdash. And Nechemia knows that it's no different. We say in Hebrew, Olam keminhago noheg. So the second they find out that Nechemia wants to rebuild Yerushalayim, and when I say rebuild Yerushalayim, as I showed you I'll show it again, I guess, a little later so we can remind ourselves, he doesn't want to build the entire city. He wants to build the quarter of the Jews. He wants to give the Jewish people a sense of security, a place where they can worship and spiritually without having the problems of outsiders. It's also one of the ways that he deals with and will deal with assimilation. as well. So the first thing these three characters are going to do is they're going to send letters to the king, Artaxerxes, asking him to stop helping the Jewish people and stop the construction. And I assume what he would do is explain to the king the Jews are rebelling. And we've seen this happen before. It's not something new. And the king, Artaxerxes, like he did before, would probably, I think it's just logical, he would surrender to that idea to halt and stop, since, assuming that we're right, all kings, especially a king that reigns over such a huge, ginormous territory, he desires quiet in his region more than appeasing his servant Nechemia, right? I mean, having a quiet region is much better than doing something good for your servant, right? And as a result of all that, Yerushalayim would remain in ruins, which would defeat the entire purpose for Nechemiah's travel to Yerushalayim from the get-go, from the start. The whole reason why he's coming to Yerushalayim is to rebuild. So he's afraid. It's a chess game. He knows that if they see him, making charts, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to send out letters. So in order to prevent such a scenario, Nechemia must determine the facts on the ground as soon as possible without anybody finding out. And that's why he doesn't even tell his own people. Mamash, in stealth mode, so that there's no leaks, right? And that way, by the time the letters that, and they wrote letters, they wrote igrot, they write these letters to Artaxerxes, who lives all the way up north in Shushan, until it arrives in Shushan, gets to the king's court. He needs time to go over it, to investigate. I mean, any king that was self-respecting king would have to investigate. You don't just rely on what they're saying. He investigates. He finds out what's going on, and then he has to give an order to halt the construction, write it. He has to sign it. Stamp it with his approval, and then send it back to Yerushalayim. And that takes that takes months. It takes half a year. It could take a year. There's no instant messaging. And by the time it gets to Yerushalayim, by that time, Nechemia already wants to plan ahead that when it finally comes and arrives, halt and stop, with the construction, it won't have any meaning because the wall by then should be built at that time already. And that's exactly what happened. The construction of the wall, Chomot Yerushalayim, basically were completed in 52 days. That's it. He completed the Chomot Yerushalayim, building it in 52 days. 52 days is not enough for the letters to go back and forth. It takes a lot longer than that. And he knew that. But had he started making his charts in broad daylight, they would have seen it right away. They would have understood what was going on, and they would get the jump on him and send out the letters. But by the time he finished gathering all the info, which probably took time, and putting his the plan together and the construction plan together, right? Some of you, I assume, have some experience with kablanim and working with people who do shiputzim in Israel. It takes a long time until they actually start the work. And even when they start the work, they stall, they stop, they have to get this material, they have to, buy this material, this piece is missing. And by the time, he comes back to work, who knows, a month's going to have passed by. The truth is, in my building, on the bottom floor, somebody's been already doing the shiputz for over a year and a half already. Because there's also the RYO, and they give all these all these different rules and regulations that always constantly change. So Nechemia knew this. So therefore, he starts out with his plan, gathering the intel, gathering all the facts, understanding what materials do I need, what am I missing, which areas of the wall needs to be renovated lightly, which needs a lot more work, and it takes him only 52 days. How did he succeed to do this without tractors, without these big? How does he do 52 days? So in Perek Vav, in Perek Vav, Pasuk Tet Vav, it says B'mefurash. It says, you can open up Perek Vav, chapter 6, Pasuk Tet Vav 15. It says, Vatishlam hachoma ב-25 לאלול, כ"ה אלול, ל-52 yom. That's it. It took him altogether 52 days. And there's no chance, as I said before, that the letters sent to the king in Shushan would be signed, sent back to Yerushalayim in such a short time. This truly is an amazing logistical operation. It really, really is. And that's why there's so much emphasis and so many prakim, that portray what happened. And we'll go through it. And later on, we will also discuss how Nechemia managed to carry it out as well. And even though it's also possible, and it occurred to me, and this was a positive thing, it was going towards his success. It's possible that the raw materials were already there, that he didn't have to go out and buy and purchase, like Shlomo HaMelech did when he was building Beit HaMikdash. He had to hire Hiram all the way up north and Tzur and other places, to bring all the materials. The materials were really there. They were there. And they were boulders and stones and rocks from the rubble and the ruins. So he had a lot of the material. And the truth is, he was very smart. He was reusing materials, which, by the way, we'll see later on, it's one of the things that the allies, not their allies, but Sanballat's allies, were basically ridiculing Nechemia and the construction workers, saying, you're using old stones and it's ridiculous. Why don't you go ahead and buy new stuff? That would give them time to be able to get the signed document that they need from Shushan. Nevertheless, it does not diminish, I think, the magnitude of his achievements, of Nechemiah's achievements, rebuilding the wall in literally 52 days, which is really pretty unbelievable. The way Nechemiah conducts himself throughout the prakim, the next couple of prakim, proves that already on his arrival, he understood the powers he was up against, which makes him very, very different than Ezra. He must have planned ahead. He must have understood who the powers that be is, and he knew his weakness, his personal weakness. Being a Jew, unfortunately, we'll see that later, being a Jew is a weakness in today's world. Hopefully, Be'ezrat Hashem, it's changing, right? But still, you're a Jew, you have to be in defense mode. No matter where you are in the entire world, you're in defense mode, right? And he understood this, that, being a governor, a Jewish governor in the Persian Empire means it's a certain type of weakness. But he also studied the weaknesses of his opponents, of Sanballat and Tovia and Geshem Ha'aravi. And he took advantage of it in order to reach his goals. And as we will see later on, Nechemia is constantly a step ahead of his opponents in this power struggle between them. Mamash, a chess game. He's just thinking ahead, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 moves ahead, so that he can always be ahead, so he can anticipate what they're going to do. And he studied them very well, as we're going to see. Right? He knows what they're going to do, and he prepares in advance. So the swiftness and the speed of building this wall is a classic example where Nechemia knew that he's basically on borrowed time until these opponents figure out what he's doing, so that he devises a plan to build a wall. What he does, it's really pretty amazing. It's kind of like a simultaneous job that he uses everyone. He decides to build the entire wall, complete on all sides simultaneously, putting it all together in one go. Like, instead of working on specific parts of the wall, okay, so now we're going to build the western wall, we'll build the northern part of the wall, we'll build the gate on the south. He decided to construct the entire thing at once, kind of like Lego, like just putting it all together in one bang, right? I wish construction in modern Yerushalayim would also be that way. It'd be so much better for us that everything is done, together, instead of okay, they're closing down, Jabotinsky to widen the sidewalks, and that takes about a month, and then when they're done with that, they're doing the same thing with Palmach, and then a month later they're doing. Wouldn't it be great if they did everything in 1 month? It would be amazing, right? Everything would be done in one month, and then we can enjoy everything. But it's not. It's hard to do that. But that's what Nechemia does. He succeeds, and he manages to build, and that's how he succeeded building the wall in 52 days, because it was all done together. Had he done each part separately, it might have taken him a lot longer. How did he do that? How did he succeed in doing that altogether, this task? So what he does is that he doesn't only recruit, he recruits everyone, all of Am Yisrael. He doesn't go ahead and just recruit the pros, the contractors, the builders, those who are mumchim, right? But every Jew in the area was given a task to do. So there was nobody that just was sitting around doing nothing. Everyone, right? Children, parents, you could be a professor for law, you're going to get your hands dirty and build a wall. You can be a musician, you're going to get your hands dirty and you're going to get to work. You can be a contractor who's used to building these great big things and you're told to do something specific to help. Everyone has a task to do. He appoints guards also. This is all beforehand. He appoints guards all along the walls. Why? To prevent Sanballat, Tobiah's, and Geshem's allies from harassing the construction workers, trying to squash our morale. And as we go through the psukim, we're going to see that one of the challenges that Nechemia has is how does he inspire these people to build a wall while at the same time, their neighbors are literally throwing stones at them. And we'll see later also trying to kill them, literally, at nighttime, putting up boulders and trying to ruin some of the parts of the walls. Like it's mamash, as we say, milchemet ha'tasha. What we're going through today in Yerushalayim, but really all over the country, when we have, Arabs, terrorists, I shouldn't say Arabs, terrorists constantly trying to kill and hurt and bother us. That already happened during the time of Ezra a little bit, but mainly during the time of Nechemia when he's just trying to build the wall, which he was given the authority to do, right? If you recall, if you go back to, it's this amazing pasuk, the end of Perek Bet, pasuk Kaf, he says, Velachem en chelek utzdaka v'zikaron b'Yerushalayim, right? Nechemia said, you have no jurisdiction here. You don't. This belongs to Am Yisrael, to the Jewish people. And Artaxerxes not even allowed me to do it. But that's not good enough for the nations around us. So let's step back just for a moment before we go into the Perek Gimel is very easy to read. I mean, it's very hard to understand. So I'm trying to give it the background because it really just goes through the building of the wall, of the Choma. But before that, let's just step back just for a moment and expand on these characters, these enemies. Know your enemy, right? Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem Ha'aravi. So it's so interesting, but it's easily to notice that Sanballat, the name Sanballat, I think I might have said this before, maybe last week, it's not a Jewish name. In fact, it's a name derived from one of the Babylonian gods. And interestingly, this is very interesting that I found, just to give us like a point of a historical point of how these people really existed, right? He's not just the guy that was mentioned here in Ezra Nechemia, but Sanballat appears in a letter from a Jew written from Elephantine, which is basically on. I'll show you a map where it is in the southeast of Egypt. Okay, I'll show you in a minute where it is on a map. Now there is something called the Elephantine papyri, and it was discovered in 1907. Lots of documents written by these Jews living in Elephantine. I went to Wikipedia just because it's a great, easy source, and I checked some of the sources, make sure they're it's the real deal. But the Elephantine papyri are basically caches of legal documents and letters written in Aramaic. That's the spoken language then, dated, as we see from Sefer Ezra Nechemia, dating to sometime, these letters, the documents between the 5th century BC, around, between the 7th century and the 5th, possibly 4th century BC. And these papyri documents, the presence starting, like I said, around 7th century to the 5th, basically depict a community of Jews, Jewish mercenaries, right, Judean mercenaries, and their families on the Elephantine area, who guarded the frontier between Egypt and a place called Nubia to the south of Egypt. Following the Churban Beit HaMikdash, the Babylonian destruction of Yerushalayim back in 586, in the 6th century, There were Judean refugees. We learned about Yirmiyahu who went down to Egypt, etc. Right? So there are a lot of refugees that didn't stop, on the border between Eretz Israel and Egypt. They went all the way down south. So there was these Judeans, these Jewish refugees. They traveled all the way south. What may be called even possibly there's a calling the Exodus in reverse, right? Running away from destruction in Eretz Israel, going the other way down south to Egypt. And they settled in a place called Elephantine. And they maintained there, which is pretty amazing, their own Beit Mikdash, their own temple. They built a kind of a Beit Mikdash, which they actually used to sacrifice, and they had offerings there, korbanot. The evidence we have, Josephus talks about it, that this Beit Mikdash was basically destroyed in around 410 BC, something like that, at the instigation of there were some Kohanim there from another called the Knum. So I just want to show you just where this is. So I just took you could see on the bottom here. So this is Eretz Israel over here, right? Pardon my map. I just took it off, Google Maps over here. So this is Eretz Israel. Eilat is around here, just to ground us where we are. Eilat is over here on the tip, right? This is the Midbar Sinai. This is already Egypt. This whole thing is Egypt. And right here on the southeast of Egypt, this is Elephantine. And there must have been refugees that kind of ran over here. So there's a letter that was written by one of these Jews over here. They were finding documentation, really talking about Sanballat, who was the governor of the Shomron. So he's not just mentioned here in Sefer Nechemia, he's also mentioned there, which really brings to light a little bit the reality that these people were actually real. So I said, let's not stop just at, with Sanballat. Regarding Tuvia or Tovia, right? It can be speculated also, fairly well-founded also way, that he was the governor of Amnon. And in a later period, Josephus, much, much later, mentions that the sons of Tuvia, or Tovia, the sons of Tuvia, were associated with the Jewish elite in Yerushalayim, which indicates that they were a governing family and they had, place of power. Also, the common assumption is that Geshem HaAravi, as we saw, he was down south, was indeed the governor of the south. So these are real people, and people that come from powerful families. And we see from here that Nechemia started to deal with them themselves, mamash. And the plot that they actually, you'll see later, they plotted to murder Nechemia, literally. So if you put all of these three men together, they control the areas surrounding Yerushalayim. In comes this nice mensch of a Jew, Nechemia, who never got his hands dirty when he was living in the palace in Shushan, giving the wine, the cup beer to Artaxerxes. And now he comes to Yerushalayim and needs to deal with these crazy guys who are bloodthirsty, literally, and we'll see that. But he's so smart. Like I said, he's a good chess player, and he plans ahead, and he succeeds at the end of the day in building a wall against these enemies, what they wanted. So Nechemia's arrival is uncomfortable for these three leaders because it's more beneficial for them that Yerushalayim remains weakened and enslaved to them. See, they control everything, and they were used to controlling everything for many, many years. The majority of the Jews, the powerful Jews, if we go back to Mordechai, who was a very powerful Jew, but he was living all the way up north in Shushan, right? That's where it all happened. We're talking about, very, very far away. In Judea, in Yerushalayim, it was empty. There was no real leadership, right? Until Ezra comes 13 years before Nechemia, but he was only a spiritual leader. He wasn't a leader that was really cleaning up house strategically from a physical point of view, from a state point of view, right? He was more the spiritual, reading the Torah, bringing back halachot, sukkot, as we saw here, right? But Nechemia wants a strong Jewish community, and him coming interferes with this control that these three governors had over Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim was a very important place, right? Which really means it's about money. At the end of the day, it all channels to money. There's a lot of donations that were always geared to the Beit HaMikdash. And we saw that Ezra before Nechemia was mechadesh, the donations to the Kohanim. A lot of money was poured into this. It's a big temple, big Beit Mikdash, not only used by the Jewish people, but by all the surrounding nations. Some who worship the God of Israel, Elohei Hashamayim, as was mentioned many times, and some just wanting to, practice, the gods of the area. But there are also areas in Har HaBayit where idolatry was practiced as well. So a lot of money was passing. Whoever controls that is very wealthy. And these three families, these three leaders, controlled it. And in comes Nechemia, wanting to solidify, wanting to close off Yerushalayim and Har HaBayit from the rest of the world, including these three leaders, and they're gonna lose their stronghold on money. At the end of the day, in most cases, money plays one of the most important roles in most conflicts, right? We see that's one of the ways, what's going on with Ukraine and with Putin as well. A lot of money. We're talking about billions and billions and billions of money. Anyway, they control all the work inside of Yerushalayim and outside and so forth. And they need to have an open door constantly. And what Nechemia wants to do is going to take that away from me. So alongside the descriptions of this construction of the wall, Nechemia also describes, that we'll see soon throughout the book, in the coming prakim, how his enemies, mainly Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, seek to prevent him from building the wall altogether. They don't want a wall, as we mentioned. So at first, what do they start doing? They know that he was given the authority, the Igeret from Artaxerxes. But they're very powerful. They're 3 against 1. 3 against 1 is more powerful, than 1 against 1, and they know that, and they control bigger areas than Yerushalayim. Even though Nechemia did work personally for Artaxerxes. Anyway, the first thing they do, as we'll see, this is towards the end of Perek Aleph, starting from Perek Gimel, Perek Gimel Pasuk Lamed Gimel. Okay, that's where we're going to start reading today. I'm going to skip. I might read the first couple of pasukim of Perek Gimel, then skip to Pasuk Lamed Gimel. But the first thing that we're going to see that these 3 characters do is they mock the builders. Mamash, it's childish, but it works. They mock the builders and try to portray their actions as a rebellion against the king. That's what they try to do. They just stand around, cursing them out, possibly throwing stones at them, scaring them. And as the pasuk that we read last week, Perek Bet, if you open up in Perek Bet, pasuk Yud Tet, towards the end of the Perek, I just want to read it, it's important. So open up Perek Bet, pasuk Yud Tet, 19. It says, Vayal'igu lanu, vayivzu aleinu, vayimuru ma hadavar hazeh asher atem osim. Ha'al hamelech atem mordim? Right? Kind of like trying to convince the workers, you're rebelling against the king. Because of you, Artaxerxes is going to come down, bring his warriors, and he's going to shut you down. Right? The attempt to define the construction of the wall, the Chomot, as a revolt against the king of the Persian Empire is actually an implicit threat. That's what they're doing. They're threatening them. They intend to tell the king about the actions of the Jews, thereby causing disproportionate harm to them, possibly. But Nechemia answers them coolly, and he says to them that the king is by his side and that he is not afraid. And here we see a real difference between Nechemia exuding his authority over them, given to him by Artaxerxes, something that Ezra never did. He never used his authority. And here we're seeing for the first time, he's throwing his weight. He's saying, I am Nechemia. I have all the support I need from Artaxerxes. Now, whether he does or doesn't, because at the end of the day, Artaxerxes will side with Sanballat and with Geshem and with Tobiah, and not with Nechemia, because I assume he doesn't want rift, he doesn't want war, he doesn't want battles. It's better to say no and have these 3 guys appeased than having the one person, Nechemia, who, by the way, also works for him, right? So at the beginning of Perek Dalid, that we'll see later on, it is described how these enemies these three people and their allies seek to harm the Jewish people physically, mamash physically, trying to kill Jewish souls, trying to just really do what they can to stop the construction. And it is also clear that they're not interested in conquering Yerushalayim, and that's the most amazing thing. These people, Sanballat was the governor of the Shomron. He's not the governor of Yerushalayim. Tovia and Geshem, they're not interested in taking over Yerushalayim. Rather, they just want to harm the Jews so that the Jews can't build, so that the Jews can't build themselves an empire. And this should ring a bell. It really should ring a bell to what the world has been doing the last, I don't know how many years, giving billions of dollars to the people in Gaza, Kilkilia, and all those places. Why? So they can build hospitals, build schools, infrastructure. And instead, what are these Gazans doing, their leadership doing? Instead of building up Gaza, they're buying missiles to bomb us, kill us. And the same thing is happening here, mamash, acts of terrorism. That's what we're going to be reading about, acts of terrorism, in order to damage the morale of the builders. That's one of the ideas of terrorism, to terrify Am Yisrael, to terrify the builders so they don't want to build, so they just leave it in ruins. And that goes to give more money and to be more passive for all these leaders and delay the momentum of the construction. That's what they try to do, mamash terrorism, to make them scared. And as we said, Nechemia was ready for all of their attempts, and that's why he was a great chess player. He encourages, because he knew this was going to happen. So he starts at nighttime. He gets all the facts done. He puts it all together. And in stealth mode, he goes ahead and then finally he opens up and he tells the Jewish people, the Jewish population, to disregard anything that these people are doing. Don't worry, I have your back, right? And that's why he builds little pockets of guards to guard them. He does everything in his power to uplift their spirits and strengthen their belief in their ability to complete this construction of the wall. And even more, like I said, there's guards, kind of like the Haganah, right? The Haganah, the Etz of the Lechi. He establishes these little groups of guards to thwart the attacks of all these leaders. And as we go through the book, when we finally reach Perek Vav, chapter 6, the battle intensifies. When they see that Nechemia has some type of success in ensuring that the people succeed and continue to build, they intensify their fight. And then they go after Nechemia himself. You see, Nechemia is a great man. He comes in with the intentions to do good for Am Yisrael, to do good for the people of Israel, to do good for Yerushalayim, to do good for the spirituality, to do good, to bring security so that the Jewish people can flourish. And it bothers these three people. It bothers them immensely. As we said at the end, that's such a hard pasuk when somebody does good for Am Yisrael. So what do they try to do? They literally, as we'll see this in Perek Vav, they literally try to assassinate Nechemia. That's what they try to do. They're going to try to assassinate him. Amazing. An assassination attempt. So what do? At first, we're going to learn, they invite him to a remote place where it would be easy for them to murder him. That's what they do. Now, like I said before, he's a good chess player. He knows what's going on. So he refuses to meet them, knowing what's going to happen if he does. And he claims he doesn't have time. He's busy. He's a governor after all. So they're not happy with that. They spread rumors that they plan to assassinate him that night. Why? And they open, and the rumors are on purpose so that Nechemia hears that they want to kill him. And the people hear that they're going to assassinate him to try to encourage Nechemia to run away. Now, what would they gain by having Nechemia run away? First of all, it damages his reputation, and it also weakens the Jewish spirit when their leader is run off. when he has to escape for his life. That damages the reputation as a leader and also the spirit of the Jewish people. But Nechemia, he remains in Yerushalayim. He doesn't fold. That is a strong politician, a strong leader. In addition to dealing with all of these enemies, Nechemia also elaborates on his leadership towards the people. He's a great leader for them. Throughout these episodes, Nechemia puts forward a series of brilliant steps that helps him meet his goal of creating this important wall. And we talk about this wall, what's the big deal? But as I started off saying, a wall is important. It keeps people in, it secures them, it allows you to close the gate. You don't really know what's going on, it allows you some peace of mind. And at the beginning of chapter 3, Gimel, that we're gonna read just a couple of psukim now, there's a list of all the construction workers and what part of the wall that they built. He was very methodic, extremely methodic. He didn't say, okay, now go out to work. He had charts and plan and Excel sheets and one after the other. Your family will be doing this part and your family. But it's interesting because we're going to see that it's uneven. There are groups of workers who receive a very large portion of almost 1,000 amot to work on. That's huge, 1,000 amot of a wall, and other groups only need a few amot to build. So I assume, I can't prove it, but I assume it depends on how badly the different parts of the wall were damaged. As we saw, not all parts of the wall were damaged, the same. There were parts that were, completely ruined, and some that might have needed just minor renovations. Also, it turns out that it also depended on the number of people in each group, right? He was very methodic. But a very important step that Nechemia takes to encourage the people not to give up when you have, it's easy to say, but when people are throwing stones at you, cursing you out, and telling you that you're the reason for a possible ruin of Yerushalayim, Shasta is going to send us troops and everything, and day in, day out, and killing people and stabbing people. Literally, that's what happens to us today. But that's what happened then too, so much so that they planned later on to assassinate Nechemia. So Nechemia has a very important job to do. So he puts everyone to work. Each group worked on a part that he assigned them to. Each family. But what he did also is that he made sure that each family was working on a certain part of the wall that was closest to his or her home and residence. Right? That way, everyone does their part meticulously and quickly, because the second you're done, you go right back to your home. It's really close by. You don't have to travel. You don't have to go, to the other side of Yerushalayim just to get to your work, right? It's right there. You open your door, you go out, and it's right there. That's the part that you're in charge of. It also gives you a sense of, you're in charge of making sure that you're secure. It gives you ga'ava, pride, like you're in charge of your area. So, and that's very, very brilliant. So Nechemia's crowdfunding, strategy has many, many advantages, both as far as morale is concerned and purpose. Everyone is involved. Now, I really checked this out, but there's one of the most famous cases. You might all know this, but one of the most famous cases in which a technique such as this crowd, was used, was a battle in World War I called the Battle of Marne. You could look it up. The Germans in World War I, they were literally on the verge of conquering Paris. And the governor of the city decided on an emergency mobilization. See, you had a lot of French troops that were outside of Paris. How do you get them so quickly from, 10, 20, 30, 40 kilometers out, bring them to Paris to defend Paris? It's about to fall by the Germans. So what he does very, very smartly, an emergency mobilization of all private taxi cabs in the city. He asks for help from all the private taxis, and he says, please go and get soldiers, transport an entire French division from a remote location. He involves everybody. He involves all the taxi drivers, in the city of Paris to help him. He needs help. All taxi owners in Paris enlisted, according to Wikipedia anyway. And there's a couple of dissenting views there, but in general, that's what's accepted. And the French army managed to turn the tables and defeat the Germans. And I think they succeeded in transporting, I think, over 6,000 soldiers in private taxi cabs. When there's a national struggle, people look for ways to help and assist and find unity. They really do. And they try to take advantage of patriotic sentiments that rise during combat. And Nechemia managed to improve the security in Yerushalayim significantly because of this wall, but because of the involvement of all the people. And to this day, there are remains of Nechemia's wall as well. You could it exists over there. So I just want to say also, just because we're talking about this national struggle, and here I just want to thank the people of Chovevei Zion. 2 years ago, even a year and a half ago, when we had missiles coming, if you recall, in Sderot, I broadcast an entire email list, and I asked people to donate their time, but also donate possibly money to buy food and to buy packets. I with the help of somebody from Sderot, a lot of us bought packets for children. If you recall, that they were in the shelter for a very long time, and we did such great things. And even last year, also during the missiles, when people were evacuating, Baruch Hashem, all I really did was broadcast an email to our shul, and people immediately opened up their homes. I think there were like 25 homes that I succeeded in putting out, that we had people that were coming in and sleeping in people's homes, running away from the missiles and from the shelters, kids, not being able to sleep. So it's true, when something happens to our nation, people get together and we succeed in uniting each other. And that's exactly what happened here with Nechemia. He involves everybody because he knows he is running out of time. And that's how he succeeded in building the whole wall in 52 days. I'm going to share just to show you, I found a great map similar to the map that I showed you last week. This is the map that I showed you last week, if you recall, right? The red area is the wall that we're talking about. Today, the black area is what I said is today's, I'll show you here just for those who weren't here. If you recall, right, this is the Har HaBayit, okay? This is Har HaBayit. Ir David, this is the original Jewish quarter that we're talking about now in Sefer Nechemia. But in truth, as you can see on the left, I put Herod and Hashmonaim. They made Yerushalayim much bigger, and every couple of generations it became bigger and bigger until the Ottoman Empire, which is the black, which is basically what we have today. That's the old city today, and these are the different quarters, right? The Christian quarter, the Muslim quarter, the Armenian quarter, and the Jewish quarter, the Rova Yehudi. These are the different Asharim. I'm not. We did this last week. I just want to remind everybody. So what we're talking about, the wall that we're talking about that Nechemia built, is really the small wall in red. This was the Jewish quarter. There were other nations and other Jews that were living out here, but this was really the quarter that belonged to the Jews. I found a great map similar to what I had done in a series called Mikra LeYisrael, that published by Magnus, Hebrew University. Very similar to what I did. And here you can see, I'm not going to go through the entire parak because it's a little boring to go through the parak. We don't really learn much. That's why I gave you all the information today. We'll just read a couple of psukim in a minute. But you can see in Hebrew, basically, it really tries to go through all of the different parts of the wall that are mentioned in Perek Gimel that we're going to read now. So let's just go jump in and read a couple of psukim from Perek Gimel. We'll read the first 2 psukim in Perek Gimel, then we're going to jump to Pasuk Lamed Gimel, okay? So, Pasuk Aleph in Perek Gimel, Vayakom el Yashiv HaKohen HaGadol ve'echav HaKohanim vayivnu et Sha'ar HaTzon, that's one of the sharing we saw there, Heima Kichu vayamidu daltotav ve'ad Migdal HaMe'ah Kichu ad Migdal Hananel, El Yashiv, the chief Kohen HaGadol, got up with his brothers, the other Kohanim. They took in hand of building the sheep doorway, meaning Nechemia also used the Kohanim, he used the Levim, he used everybody. He used everybody to start building. Pasuk Bet, Ve'al Yado Banu Anshe Yericho, Ve'al Yado Bana Zakur ben Imrei, etc., etc., etc. Really it goes through all of the family members and the Rashi Matot, we just read that in Shlach Lecha, the heads of families that actually went ahead and helped build the actual Choma. I'm not going to go through the whole parak. You can read it at home, read it when you have time, but let's skip to Pasuk Lamed Gimel. That's the continuation of the story, right? So between Pasuk Bet up to Lamed Bet is basically just going through all the names of the people and what they built. But starting Pasuk Lamed Gimel depicts the start of the war, the battle between these three figures that we talked about, Sanballat, Achoroni, Tovia, and Geshem, and Am Yisrael, Am Yehuda. So Pasuk Lamed Gimel, Vayihi ka'asher shama Sanballat ki anachnu bonim et hachoma, vayichar lo, vayichas harbe, vayal'eg al Yehudim. Right, his strategy was first curse them out, throw little stones at them, try to reduce their morale, right? So when Sanballat heard that the Jews had begun rebuilding the wall, he became furious and began to ridicule us. Pasuk Lamed Daled, Vayomer, Lifnei Echav, Bechel Shomron, Vayomer, Ma HaYehudim HaAmelalim Osim, Hayazvu Lahem, Hayizbachu, Hayechalu Vayom, Hayechayu Et HaAvanim, Me'arimot, He'afar, Vehema Srufot. In front of his companions, his allies, and the Shomronim troops, where he's a governor of the Shomron. So he had I guess, an army at his disposal. So what does he say? He goes and he talks to the Jews. What do these miserable Jews think that they're doing? That's how he's talking to the Jews. These miserable Jews. Talk about anti-Semitism, right? Do they intend to rebuild the city? Do they think that they offering sacrifices, they can finish the work in one day? Can they make building stones out of heaps, burnt rubble? What are they going to do? Take the remains and just build it? They're ridiculous. Look at these. And he's trying to rile them up, of the allies around, and trying to reduce the morale, trying to make us feel small. Pasuk Lamed Hey, v'Tovia ha'amoni etzlo. It wasn't just Sanballat, Tovia too. Vayomer gam asher hem bonim, im ya'aleh shu'al ufaratz chomat avanihem. Tovia was standing there also. I guess they all came to see what was going on as they started to build. And he added, what kind of wall could they build? Even a fox could knock it down. Ridiculing the workers, trying to convince the workers, you're not going to succeed anyway. You don't have what it takes. You're doing it also really quickly because your leader Nechemia is telling you to do faster, faster, faster. You're not going to be able to, take your time. Meanwhile, they send letters all the way to Shushan, hoping that it will get sooner and halt and stop the entire thing. Pasuk Lamed Vav, Shema Eloheinu, ki ahinu vuza ve'ashev chirpatam al rosham utnem leviza be'eret shivya. So I prayed, says Nechemia. I prayed, hear how they make fun of us. God, they're making fun of us. Let their ridicule fall on their own heads. Let them be robbed of everything they have. And let them be taken as prisoners to a foreign land. Because I have the authority to do this. I know that I'm in the right. They're in the wrong. So he's praying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Instead of retaliation, instead of opening up a battle, a front with them, he davens to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, first thing that he does. And then he continues in Pasuk Lamed Zayin, Ve'al techas al avonam ve'chatatam milefanecha al timache ki ichisu leneged habonim. Don't forgive the evil they do, and don't forget their sins, for they have insulted us who are building. We are doing melechet kodesh. What did Nechemia want to do? All he wanted to do was come to Yerushalayim and continue teaching Torah the way Ezra did. He wants to build a nice living quarters for the Jewish people, give them stability, give them a sense of security. What does he want to do? He's not even interested in opening up war. And Sanballat and Tovia and Geshem, they're not even interested in conquering Jerusalem. They just want control over Jerusalem. Pasuk Lamed Chet, V'nivne et hachoma v'tikasher kol hachoma ad chetzia v'yilev la'am la'asot. We end the parak with a beautiful, beautiful pasuk. So, therefore, we ignored Sanballat, We ignored their cursing. We took care of the stone throwing with the small guards that we put together, which we'll see later on that he does. I jumped the gun here. And then he says, as soon as it was half its full height, they built it in 52 days. We'll see that later, because the people were eager to work. He succeeded in bringing out the best of Am Yisrael. They stood up for justice in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. They stood up for what was important for them, and Nechemia helped them, and they succeeded. Pasuk Aleph of Perek Daled is the next step of the battle. It intensifies, as I said before, up to the fact until they plot to assassinate Nechemia. So we'll see Be'ezrat Hashem more attempts and more small little battles. The war is not won yet. We have many more battles to go through until we get to the psukim where they finally succeed in completing the wall, and then we'll see after that other things that Nechemia does. Be'ezrat Hashem. So Shavua Tov. I hope you enjoyed this class. Really a spectacular way of showing what leadership is all about, and how, unfortunately, how we were an underdog, but Baruch Hashem, with great leadership, we were able to overcome and build a wall in 52 days when we have such powerful people around us trying to stop us at every point and every time. So Shavua Tov.